over a memo released today that alleges serious corruption at the upper echelons of the FBI and the Department of Justice. Tonight, we're going to tell you the complete story about how these abuses unfolded during the Trump campaign, who was targeted, who did the targeting, how the media advanced a phony narrative throughout, and where the Mueller investigation goes from here. And along the way, we're going to speak with people who have intimate knowledge of the FISA court, including a lawmaker who has read the documents not even made public yet. And we also will have an exclusive reaction from the White House. So let's begin. The revelations of the FISA memo and what you need to know. That's the focus of tonight's angle. From the moment he came down that shiny escalator in Trump Tower, Donald Trump represented an existential threat to the D.C. swamp. He promised to end the cycle of corruption throughout the government, to make it leaner and more accountable to the people. And he even took on some of the sacred cows.
Do you trust intelligence?
Not so much from the people that have been doing it for our country. I mean, look what's happened over the last 10 years. Look what's happened over the years. I mean, it's been catastrophic. And in fact, I won't use some of the people that are sort of your standards, you know, just use them, use them, use them. Very easy to use them. But I won't use them because they've made such bad decisions. Yeah,
he had the nerve to call out the intel community, a.k.a. the deep state, as part of the problem. Well, Trump believed that everything in Washington had become politicized, bloated, and unmanageable. And what we take away from the now public House Intel Committee memo that was released today is that Donald Trump, once again, was right. When the American people think of the FBI and the Department of Justice, they should have faith that the agency's leadership use their vast powers without political bias or animus. In other words, you shouldn't be able to investigate or surveil any American without clear probable cause that a crime has been committed. And by the way, in order to secure a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act or FISA warrant, the government must also find that the person targeted, in this case, Mr. Carter Page, was acting as a foreign agent or on behalf of a foreign government. But I'll tell you this, after reading this memo today, I don't know how the FBI even met that benchmark. Now, apparently, those requirements, those statutory requirements, went out the window because they had to take out Trump by any means necessary. The FBI used a minor figure on the Trump advisory board, the aforementioned Mr. Page, in an attempt to penetrate Trump's inner circle. Now, Page had been on the FBI's radar for his activities in Russia long before his name was listed in that campaign press release in the spring of 2016. But then on October 21st, 2016, the FBI filed an application with the FISA court for a warrant to surveil Page. According to the House Intel memo, they submitted that phony Russian dossier created by British spy Christopher Steele as their primary evidence. Now, the document itself was filled with conjecture and unsubstantiated assertions about Russian efforts to cozy up to then businessman and now candidate Donald Trump. Now, we've known for some time that the dossier was funded by the DNC and the Clinton campaign. And the FBI and the DOJ knew it too. But here's the rub. Even though they knew the political origins of the dossier, the FBI did not tell the FISA court. Neither did the DOJ. They would go on to secure 3 FISA surveillance renewals on Carter Page, all based on that same dossier, Oppo research, in other words. The FISA warrants were approved by FBI Director James Comey, Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe, Acting Attorney General Sally Yates, and Deputy AG Rod Rosenstein. There are so many lapses and biases at play here, it's frankly hard to keep track of them, but we're going to do our best. We know the FBI authorized payment for the man at the center of this entire opus, Christopher Steele, for information in that dossier. And to be clear, Steele was like hardly an objective source when it came to national security matters. He's quoted in the House Intel memo as telling DOJ officials that he was, quote, desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president. Oh, no agenda there whatsoever. So he cooks up this fake dossier to try to kill Trump's candidacy. And at the same time, Steele began shooting his mouth off to Yahoo News about Carter Page's trip to Moscow, which he included in his infamous dossier. The FBI later cites that Yahoo News story as corroborating evidence of the dossier's credibility. That's a neat trick. So a story about the dossier is corroboration of the story itself, which is fake. Fantastic. The Bureau put all of that in their FISA request to continue their surveillance of Page. Now, here's where it really gets good. A month after the FBI used Steele's dossier and the fake news he leaked to get the FISA warrant, they realized Steele is leaking confidential information to the media and divulging his relationship with the FBI. So the FBI terminated its relationship with him. So here's the upshot. The predicate for the entire Trump-Russia collusion canard, the prevailing evidence advanced to surveil Page, which would lead to the creation of the Mueller investigation and all the madness that followed, was built on the foundation of the fake Steele dossier, paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC. Here is Devin Nunes from the House Intel Committee a short time ago.
And just step back for a moment. This is not trying to go after some terrorist. Then they got a warrant on someone in the Trump campaign using opposition research paid for by the Democratic Party and the Hillary Clinton campaign. That's what this is about, and it's wrong, and it should never be done.
And the Democrats, who've long been suspicious of the overreach and the bias of law enforcement, it's funny, they believe now that law enforcement can do no wrong. They can never be questioned. They're always right. The left did sound like a chorus protesting the memo's revelations today.
Each of these allegations is at best cherry-picked and at worst just simply not at all indicative of the bias that the Republicans are trying to allege.
It's likely cherry-picked, and we know what happens when you cherry-pick information.
Who knows what it might have been, FISA application, and you cherry-pick in the summary 2 points that you don't like.
Why should the FBI and the intelligence community trust our committee or Congress with sensitive and classified information if they think we're on a party line basis going to vote to cherry pick and disclose parts of it?
That's like a drinking game on a Friday night. Cherry pick. You'll be really trashed. Russian collusion, remember, was supposedly the concern that drove the FBI to apply for that surveillance warrant. So they worried that the election would be disrupted. Well, I contend that this surveillance itself was designed to disrupt the election. How was this done? First, as an insurance policy against Trump's winning, and later as an effort to undo the election and upend the presidency. What the memo makes clear, there was collusion after all, you bet. The collusion was between the Comey FBI, the Obama Justice Department, and the Hillary Clinton campaign. And that's the angle. Joining me now for reaction from Dallas is Republican Congressman John Ratcliffe. And here in Washington is Byron York, a Fox News contributor, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner, and Victoria Tensing, a former Justice Department official in the Reagan administration. Great to see all of you. We got a lot to get through, guys. Let's start with you, Congressman. The Democrats were coming at you guys with everything today, basically saying this is a big dud, that you're endangering law enforcement, and they're still keeping up with the methods and sources. You're endangering methods and sources. What's your reaction to the cavalcade of criticism that poured all over the airwaves today?
Well, Laura, good to be with you. I have to laugh that, the comments coming from Adam Schiff about protecting classified information. The irony of that is not lost on a lot of folks in Washington who are convinced that he's a graduate of the Edward Snowden School of Keeping Secrets. You know, I understand why the Democrats would be upset with what they read in that memo today, but it doesn't change the outcome of what's in there. And as you know, Laura, I'm one of the few people that have seen the underlying source documents. And having had that opportunity to review those, I feel like they are very consistent with the memo that the public was able to see today that was drafted by the majority members of the House Intelligence Committee.
All right, I want to play for everybody the question posed to Devin Nunes tonight by Brett Baer about that issue of the underlying applications. Let's watch.
Did you read the actual FISA applications?
No, I didn't. The agreement we made with the Department of Justice was to create a reading room and allow one member and two investigators to go over and review the documents. I thought the best person on our committee would be the chairman of the Oversight Committee, Trey Gowdy, who has a long career as a federal prosecutor, to go and do this.
In other words, Vicki, he was going off half-cocked. The Democrats are saying he's going off half. He didn't read the thing, and he's pushing this memo. I guess that's where the Democrats
but that's
are
what
going.
he was just following the rules that the Justice Department mandated in order to give them the documents. Those are always negotiated.
What bothers you most about what you've seen today with this memo?
Oh, there's so many things. But the first thing is that McCabe said that they would not have they would not have even gone to the FISA court unless they had that dossier. That just is really scary. And then the bootstrapping, of course. The dossier was used to put in a story, to plant a story with Michael Isikoff. He's a journalistic whore. He just takes whatever the left gives him and he rewrites it.
They're all working on the same team, though, aren't they? I mean, the media.
Oh, of course. I mean, of course.
This whole thing, they're all helping it. It's a boosting society. Everyone's boosting everyone else's narrative. A very aggressive lack of curiosity on the part of the journalist to say, well, where'd you get this information? Let me look at the underlying. Byron, you were the first person to get this memo, it looks like, in the media. One other person did, I guess, as well. But what Vicki just said about the issue of what they knew, when they knew it, what stands out for you, especially the McCabe point, the deputy director of the FBI?
Well, they said, the memo says that the dossier was an essential part of this application, and as Vicki said, it goes on to say that they wouldn't have done it without the dossier. And I've been told there are really four things that they cite as the reason for this warrant. It's the dossier, it's that Michael Isikoff article, it's the Papadopoulos case.
In Yahoo News, correct?
In Yahoo News. It's the Papadopoulos case, and it's Carter Page's history. But what I'm told is the dossier was by far the biggest of all of those. So it was absolutely essential, and it really supports this idea that without the dossier, there's no application.
And George Papadopoulos, I mean, what the heck was he doing, bragging in a bar that Hillary's emails were going to come out soon and the Russians were going to do it? Is that a reason for him to be put under
the Papadopoulos thing is one of the most ludicrous things I've heard to base anything on. Congressman,
Laura,
issue... go ahead.
I was just going to comment on the clip that you played there, Laura, about Devin Nunes' decision. Why wouldn't you send over Trey Gowdy? Why wouldn't you send over the best lawyer in Congress, a lawyer who has viewed hundreds, if not thousands, of agent declarations, affidavits, and submissions to federal courts? Why wouldn't you send a guy who knows exactly what he's looking for, what would pass the smell test and what wouldn't? I think he ought to be applauded for that decision.
Hey, Congressman, are you going to move to push to release all these underlying transcripts, redacted as necessary, of course? But the Democrats are trying to kick up dust in your face now, saying, oh, wait, well, that's not accurate. McCabe didn't say that in his closed-door testimony that they wouldn't have gone after the FISA warrant without that dossier. They're disputing that tonight on other networks. So we need to see that transcript. I know Byron wants to see it.
Yeah, I think transcripts of witness interviews, those can be redacted and made public. I think the Democrat memo, the minority memo, ought to be made public, too. I will tell you, having read that, Adam Schiff drafted that, and it's chock full of sources and methods. So it's going to have to be heavily redacted before it's made available to the public.
So that does have the sources and methods that they complained about getting compromised. That's interesting.
It does. I will say this about the underlying documents that I've been able to review. You know, it's hard to take 4 phone books worth of information and distill it down to 4 pages. So I think it's fair when the FBI director says not every material fact is included. I think that's a fair criticism. But as someone that has reviewed the underlying documents, the story ends the same way.
Okay, but are you taking things out of context? The Democrats are saying we need the whole context. You're missing key facts that would inform why this warrant was applied for, when it was applied for. You reject that.
I reject that. As you know, Laura, I'm a former terrorism prosecutor. I have significant experience with FISA. I've looked at these applications before. And I just, as I looked at the underlying applications, I kept coming to the same conclusion. I wouldn't make these representations to any federal judge, much less a FISA judge.
Yeah.
If you were a FISA judge, wouldn't you want to know if someone was asking for a warrant?
Right. Yeah, I get that, Congressman. And we got to get to Byron and Vic here, but my question to you is, was there something in that application that referenced a political motivation for the dossier? The Democrats, we got Swalwell was over talking about that today. He said that was in the document, in the application. Not mentioning Hillary by name, but that there was a political motivation. Was that in there?
Well, I don't know why Eric Swalwell would know that, because he hasn't.
Okay, I just asked you a question. Was it in there? Did they reference a political motivation for the dossier in the application?
Well, I can't disclose anything specifically that's in the underlying document. What I can, again, reiterate is it doesn't change my opinion and conclusion.
Got it. Byron, okay, I want to play this. We got to play this on. Nunes hinted that there's more to come, that this is just the tip of the iceberg in revealing DOJ, FBI corruption. Let's watch.
Are there other memos that are going to come out? Are there other memos? You said this was phase one.
Yeah, so this completes just the FISA abuse portion of our investigation. We are in the middle of what I call phase two of our investigation, which involves other departments, specifically the State Department.
Byron, what do you know?
Well, that's interesting that he says the State Department, because we have had indications recently that there is some sort of involvement of the State Department, not as much as the FBI, but we know that John Kerry, the Secretary of State, was briefed on the contents of the dossier. So that means the staff knew about it as well. So there's another phase here.
And I'll tell you another phase that should happen. The FISA court better get busy, because they're either incredibly grossly negligent.
Thank you.
Or they were lied to. And don't you think they should care? And shouldn't they have some kind of a hearing, a process?
Vicki, could the Carter Page, even with sovereign immunity concerns, could Sovereign Page file in court an action for abuse of process or sanctions against Justice Department attorneys for omitting a material fact in a FISA application? Is there any grounds for that?
Well, he could file something with the D.C. bar. He could, wherever these people are members of the bar, he could file. He's filed a case in New York. He did it pro se, so it's not, you know, but he has a darn good case.
Comey's former chief of staff, Chuck Rosenberg, was all over television today, and he said, look, if they really had concerns about this, if the Trump people or the Republicans were worried about this, they could have gone to the Inspector General and voiced their concerns. And he said they could have gone to the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, and they could go to the FBI. You know, that's what he said today. Comey's mouthpiece was all over MSNBC.
Look, I think that just ignores the political urgency of all this, because there will be an Inspector General investigation of the handling of this, and it's going to come out in 2020 or 21 or something like that.
That'll be too late, you're saying. The damage will have been done.
Well, there are people who want to remove the president from office based on this case, so we have to know what the evidence is.
And guys, up next, the White House giving an exclusive reaction to us. Hogan Gidley, Deputy Press Secretary, is going to join us to react to this memo release. Questions about Rosenstein. Up next, a lot more later. Michelle Malkin, Dan Bongino, and the media's role in helping the FBI mislead the FISA court. Coming up. Oh, the lamestream media reacted to the release of the FISA memo with alarm and wild accusations. On MSNBC, rather than discuss the content of the memo, they were so concerned about authorship and protecting Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein.
What role did the White House, in fact, play in the production of this memo? We know how it played out several months ago when Devin Nunes made that midnight run here to the White House.
It is the way Joe McCarthy used to do it. I have in my hands a document. It's just something they put, and we don't even know who the provenance of this document is. It could well have been written by White House staff people.
Let's get a response to that wild conjecture. And they, by the way, say Trump makes stuff up. They're just like making stuff off the whole cloth at MSNBC. I was at the gym watching this. Like, you got to be kidding me. White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley here to discuss the president's next moves. Okay, you heard it. You heard that.
I didn't write it.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, we ruled you out. That's good.
That's
so
one.
who else at the White House? So this is one of the lines of attack today, that there was a coordinated effort between Devin Nunes and the White House to come up with the idea for the memo, and then to push for the release of the memo, and perhaps even draft the memo. Three things: come up with the idea for the memo, draft the memo, and release the memo. What can you say to us tonight? Did the White House coordinate on any of those three levels?
We didn't come up with it. We didn't draft it. We didn't release it. So that's 3 no's, I can tell you unequivocally. That's absolutely ridiculous, and it just seems that that's kind of a diversion of some kind, because this is very clear that the memo raises serious concerns about the integrity of the decisions made at the highest levels of both the Department of Justice and the FBI. And Laura, when you can take and use the most invasive surveillance techniques on American citizens, that should be serious concern to most people.
Where are all the civil libertarians today in the Democrat Party? I mean, apparently they don't care at all about the Fourth Amendment anymore. They used to care about unlawful search and seizure, which, I guess Carter Page could make the argument that this was done unlawfully, not according to the statute. But the Democrats, apparently that's just out the window.
But the dossier, they wanted out immediately. Remember, that had to be put out. They didn't question it. They didn't source it. It was out. They wanted all that stuff out. But for some reason, they didn't want this memo out. I find that very curious. But I mean, it's a double standard. I mean, when it suits their pleasure, they want to keep it quiet. This is something that obviously is of deep concern to the American people. To use a Democrat-funded document that's clearly used for, it's a campaign oppo dump, to use that and not tell the judge that's what you're doing when they're signing FISA warrants, that's very dangerous.
There was another line of attack today by the Democrats I'd like you to respond to. Let's watch.
I'm not surprised that the FBI comes out and says that this is dangerous, declassifying this information is dangerous and endangers national security.
The so-called Nunes memo, a 4-page memo, which, by the way, threatens extremely classified information and endangers sources and methods of our intelligence community.
To be frivolous with their identity or roads that can lead to them.
It's always fun to see Nancy on a Friday night. What is your reaction here? I mean, you're endangering national security. Jonathan Turley on Tucker's show said there's literally no classified information or sources or methods in this memo at all.
Absolutely. We didn't redact a word, actually, by the way. And look, it came out today, obviously, the FBI worked with Nunes to try and declassify some of these things, sources and methods, and that's fine. That's what happened. But I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous to say, on the one hand, this is going to threaten national security and it's going to take down this government and people's lives are going to be at risk. And then when it comes out, they say that's a nothing burger. Which is it? They knew it ahead of time. They read it.
People are going to die. Like they're saying that. Right. People are going to die. And Hogan Gidley and the whole White House, President Trump, Pence, you have blood on your hands. I mean, this is where they're going.
Right, but they don't have a problem with open borders, by the way, and immigration.
No.
Time for another topic.
By the way, the Daily Beast, just for fun, the Daily Beast has a headline out tonight. We have to we'll throw this up on the screen. Trump's White House goes weirdly silent on the Nunes memo. Wait a second. You're here with us, and I think Mercedes has been out there.
Sure. Is my mic not working?
Yeah, what are they talking about? They're weirdly silent.
I don't know.
That's crazy. And by the way, John McCain has tweeted out a reaction to this. He's not happy at all. Can we put that up on screen, the McCain? Here it is. The latest attacks on the FBI and Department of Justice serve no American interests, no parties, no presidents, only Putin's, Hogan.
How in the world can you see the text messages that have come out from people at the highest levels, not the rank and file, not the people we respect and appreciate their hard work, but the top line folks who are in the Hillary Clinton investigation with an obvious pro-Hillary Clinton bias and an anti-Donald Trump bias and not be concerned whatsoever with that.
Is the president going to fire Rosenstein? He fires Rosenstein, it's going to be a political firestorm. I think it's better to have Rosenstein stay, in my view.
Well, there's been no conversation or consideration for firing Rod Rosenstein.
I mean, we know kind of what he did. He approved one of the FISA warrants. Okay. I mean, I think firing, I mean, my view of firing him is the left is begging for it. They begged for Comey to be fired. They begged for Mueller to be fired. Now they're begging for Rosenstein. They have a new target every
Absolutely.
week.
And it's the weirdly silent thing. We were having this conversation with them today. They said if you fire Rosenstein, it's a constitutional crisis.
Oh, no, I heard that.
We came out and said we're not firing him, and they go, well, isn't it still a constitutional
White House mulling firing of Rod Rosenstein.
That's right.
This will be
weirdly silent.
No, this will be I'm just going to, if I ever talk, I'm just going to call you Weirdly Silent. That's going to, I'll rename it Weirdly Silent. That's will be your name from now on. Hogan, have a good weekend. Good
Thanks
to see
so much.
you. And by the way, we're going to ask this question. What does the memo's release mean for the future of the Mueller investigation into the president? Answers to that up next. The big question now for President Trump and the country is whether the revelations in that FISA memo are reason enough to end Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. Let's ask former FBI spokesperson John Ingraham in Minneapolis, and with me here in Washington, David Rifkin, an attorney who served in both the Reagan and Bush 41 administrations. David, I want to start with you. Should this Mueller investigation be ended with what you know now?
I would not say it should be ended, but it certainly is troubling. And if further investigation reveals that there are additional misconduct that led to the Mueller investigation.
Well, this memo says that the FISA warrants were applied for with the essential element in those warrants being the dossier. They admitted a material fact to the FISA judge, namely that the dossier was an Oppo research document from Trump's opponent.
Which they did not tell the FISA court.
Right, but I'm curious about why you say this is just one, you know, if they find out more. I mean, what else could there, I mean, I guess there could be more, but isn't that enough? I mean, if you are essentially lying to a federal judge in the middle of a political campaign 2 weeks before an election, and doesn't that show a motivation that's not exactly pure as the driven snow?
No, but of course, it's very troubling. It should be investigated.
Troubling?
But Mueller himself or his staff are not directly involved in this. I would rather focus on what...
Yeah, but it was started, David, because...
No, I understand the fruit of a poisonous tree. But look, even if there is no Mueller investigation, what happened here is enormously troubling. It's a serious misconduct by the FBI and DOJ. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's prosecute the people involved. I would rather focus on the merits of a case versus talking about, at this stage, what are its implications.
John, I think the FBI today, if I were a veteran of the FBI, I wouldn't be mad at the Trump people or Nunes. I'd be mad at the leadership of the FBI who allowed the agency to be politicized and, frankly, used in many ways by people who had an agenda against this candidate, Trump, and then after the election, President Trump. I think the FBI agents were used, and the upper echelon on the FBI made huge, huge judgments of error at the very least.
I think there's many people today inside and outside the FBI that feel exactly the same way. First and foremost, there is no reason an investigation of this magnitude should be run out of FBI headquarters. The Washington field office has 1,000 agents, teams of people that do this sort of thing. This is a problem of management to have let the executive leaders allow this to occur. That's one of the things Director Wray needs to address and address immediately.
Well, I still am trying to figure out why Director Wray was saying there's a grave concern about releasing this memo. The memo has nothing classified in it. There are no sources, no methods, no compromised foreign agents' names. Why are you saying it's going to be grave damage? People doing the grave damage to the FBI or the FBI leadership.
Simple answer, because it looks bad for the FBI. It's pure self-protection, which dovetails with the fact it took over a year to turn this over and required a threat of a contempt.
Explain what you're saying. To slow it down.
It took a year for the congressional committees to get this information.
Oh, from the FBI. It's like pulling
teeth. It's a threat
teeth.
of contempt. It's pulling teeth. It has nothing to do with classified information. It has to do with the fact this is a serious misconduct that makes FBI look bad.
What should happen now that...
Serious investigation. But let me just flag one thing.
Yeah.
It's not just what was in this application. The timing is very, very suspicious
of
the application. 2 weeks
October
before
21st.
the election, right. Why not do it months earlier? Why not do it after the elections? There's a DOJ policy that's reflected in the 2012 memo by Eric Holder, the Attorney General, which says you don't investigate, absent exceptional circumstances, political campaigns because of a danger it would leak and interfere with the electoral process.
Why did he write that memo? Is that because during the Benghazi stuff? Or was that Benghazi?
Well, let's assume that he wrote it because he believed that this was the right thing to do. But yes, it was during the 2012 elections. You don't do this unless it's absolutely essential. So the real question is not only why did you withhold information from a court, why did you do it on October 21, 2016, 2 weeks before the elections? What was the urgency?
John, what happens to the leadership of the FBI now, given what we learned today in this memo? And we're hearing that there's more to come. This is just the tip of the iceberg as to what we're going to learn. And I can't wait to see what it is. But what should happen, John?
Well, I see it happening already with Director Wray. There's movements being made, somewhat glacially, but changes are happening at headquarters. You saw Mr. McCabe leave just earlier this week, and in his place is now a deputy director that's very highly regarded throughout the rank and file of the FBI. You're also starting to see other movements with executive leaders in the FBI. I think the first thing Director Wray needs to do is make sure they have wiped the slate clean of these people that perhaps had political agendas and are not doing what good FBI agents are charged with doing, remaining apolitical and protecting the Constitution of the United States.
And David, we're almost out of time, but the Comey's chief of staff, former chief of staff on TV today, and he said, oh, well, you guys, they could have gone to the FISA judge and told them about the provenance of this dossier, who paid for it, who funded it. There were things that they could have done instead of releasing this memo.
That's not how it works, and it's not enough to go with IG. Most things have to be investigated in the public light. Doing it privately is not how we deal with serious misconduct by the government. That's not what happened with 9/11. That's not, by the way, what the Senate side did with Dianne Feinstein, accusations of CIA torture, et cetera, et cetera. It has to be done in the public eye.
Gentlemen, fantastic segment. And by the way, we're going to examine the details in the memo that showed the role the media